Vamos a comenzar presentando un poco el capítulo y nuestra misión como capítulo regional. Nuestra misión es congregar y conectar profesionales de estudiantes de la acústica y del sonido en el área geográfica de América Latina. Este capítulo actúa como nexo entre la Acoustical Society of America y los hispanoparlantes interesados en la acústica y el sonido, desarrollando y divulgando actividades de interés para sus miembros. Ya hace 6 años que estamos con esta iniciativa y hemos tenido un montón de presentaciones y hoy tenemos una realmente muy interesante. El capítulo tiene una membresía muy extensa, tenemos 319 miembros repartidos en 4 continentes y en 30 países, siendo Colombia, México y Argentina los países donde más miembros tenemos. De estos 319 miembros, 65 son miembros de la Acoustical Society of America y hemos desarrollado presentaciones en las 14 áreas técnicas que divide a la acústica de la Acoustical Society of America. 94 de nuestros integrantes son estudiantes. Entonces, si se preguntan cómo hacerse miembro del capítulo, es muy simple. Tienen que entrar al link que ven ahí en la pantalla y simplemente llenar sus datos y le van a empezar a llegar los avisos de las presentaciones y actividades del capítulo. El capítulo siempre está abierto a que nuevos integrantes formen parte de la junta directiva. Este es un trabajo ad honorem, no recibimos paga por hacerlo y bueno, requiere un cierto compromiso, pero siempre estamos buscando nuevas personas que quieran involucrarse y aportar de su experiencia y de su conocimiento. Entonces pueden escribirnos un mail a esta casilla de Gmail y podemos empezar a discutir sobre su posible participación en el capítulo. Ahora, ¿cómo pueden unirse a la Acoustical Society of America si no lo hicieron? Hay una categoría nueva que se llama C Associate para personas en países en desarrollo, que incluye a todos los países de habla hispana de Latinoamérica a un precio de $50 por año. Los estudiantes tienen una categoría especial de $50 por año. Para ser full member, que le permite a uno votar en las elecciones de la Acoustical Society, el costo es de $200 por año, y un associate que tiene los mismos beneficios que un full member, pero sin derecho a voto, cuesta $150 los primeros 5 años y luego uno puede transicionar después de esos 5 años al full membership. Esta es la junta directiva. Tenemos integrantes de distintos países y muy distintas especialidades dentro de la acústica. Y estas son nuestras redes sociales en las cuales pueden conectarse con nosotros y ver, nosotros posteamos los eventos que vamos generando y las grabaciones de los eventos están en nuestro canal de YouTube. Well, I will switch to English now. Today's presentation is called Resonance, Restoration and Connection, Expanding the Role of Acoustics in Human Experience. And we have a great presenter today. I'm very proud to introduce Dr. Alaa Algargoosh. Dr. Algargoosh is an assistant professor of architecture at Virginia Tech, where she directs the Advanced Acoustics Design Lab, and she's a research affiliate at the MIT Media Lab. Her research bridges architecture, acoustics, computational design, immersive technology, environmental psychology, and now generative artificial intelligence. Dr. Algargoosh has been recognized internationally for her work at the intersection of design, art, and technology. She's also the recipient of the Acoustical Society of America's Mauro Pierucci Prize, and her work has been published at JASA, the Journal of the Acoustical Society of America, and at Applied Acoustics. Her current research focuses on supportive acoustic environments, generative artificial intelligence for acoustic design, and sustainable metamaterials. Through her interdisciplinary approach, Dr. Algargoosh seeks to redefine the role of sound in shaping immersive, inclusive, and high-performance environments that enhance human well-being and foster social connection. So it's a pleasure for me to present Dr. Algargoosh, and will now give her the lead of this presentation. Good luck.
Thank you very much, Fernando, for the kind introduction, and thank you for the invitation to share my work here. I'm going to start sharing my screen. I'm excited to share my work today. As Fernando mentioned, my work covers multiple topics, including metamaterials and generative AI, in addition to acoustic experiences. I'll focus today on the work that is related to acoustic experiences. I'll start with the oral effect project, in which I investigated the impact of acoustic environments on emotions and well-being. In that project, I used virtual reality to represent the acoustics and the visuals in order to represent the architectural acoustics of space, and then measured the emotional impact using biosignals, including heart rate and skin conductance, in addition to the biosignals represented the objective measures, and then as self-report represented the subjective measures of the experience and the emotional impact. In addition, I was interested to explore the physical aspects related to the emotional impact in a way to connect the emotional indicators with the acoustic parameters in order to inform the design of spaces that support emotions and well-being. So the goal was to understand the role of space design in shaping the acoustic environment and therefore impacting the experience. In that project, we selected 4 buildings in Detroit for their historical and social significance. The buildings included 2 mosques and 2 churches, and the purpose for that was my interest in investigating the role of the cultural background in the impact of the acoustic environments on emotions. In that project, we had dry recordings of religious chants, and then we played the dry recordings in the selected buildings, and then we recorded the sound with the reverberance of the space. So we had dry recordings and wet recordings. And the goal was to explore whether we know that research in music demonstrated that musical characteristics of the sound itself can evoke certain emotions. And my question was whether the acoustic environment of the space can amplify that emotional impact, and whether that amplification will vary depending on the characteristics of the acoustics of the space. I'll share some of the highlights of that research, and if you're interested, you can read the full paper. One of the interesting results was that we wanted, given that we are using exactly the same recording, except that one of them was dry, meaning that it was recorded in anechoic chamber, and then the second one was recorded in the field of the actual space that we wanted to study. We were interested to see that it's the same pattern. What you're seeing here is the heart rate of one of the participants in building A and another participant in building B. So the light gray color represents the heart rate listening to the dry recording, and then the dark gray represents the heart rate listening to the wet recording. So you can notice that it's the same pattern, which is resulting from the musical characteristics evoked by the sound itself. However, what was interesting is that the level was elevated with the wet recording if we compare it with the dry recording. So after I published this research, Jeff Howley, who is an acoustician who works as an acoustic consultant in worship spaces, contacted me and shared his article in which he mentioned, I joked before that the next time your pastor or worship leader asks for a mix that really gets everyone's heart racing, you know you can probably turn the reverb up rather than down, all other things being equal. So he was telling me that that was his intuition, but now he has the scientific evidence to back it up. And as you can see here in the graph below, when we asked the participants to report their experiences regarding different kinds of emotions, listening to both the dry and wet recording, the most significant difference that we noticed was related to the spiritual feeling, meaning that when they listened to the wet recording versus the dry recording, the wet recording amplified the spiritual emotion most significantly than other emotions. So I was interested in that because there was this mention in the literature about the link between resonance and emotions. And I wanted to find a scientific way to measure that emotional impact. But now there is another challenge, which is how do I measure resonance, which is represented in room modes in spaces with complex geometries? The reason for that was that the amplification of the sound resulting from the room modes or the resonance creates unequal distribution of amplification of the sound in different locations within the same space. And that was mentioned in the literature related to Hagia Sophia. So the traditional method for calculating room modes is using the equation below. Room modes basically represent the constructive and destructive interference. And then the equation that you see below allows us to only consider the dimensions of the room. While we cannot, in that case, since I was interested in the amplification of the sound source and how is that amplification is non-uniformal depending on the location and other aspects related to the complex geometry, this equation does not allow us to take into consideration the geometry of the space and the materials in addition to the source type and its location. So I developed a method which I called the multiple convolution. This method was inspired by the Alvin Lucier's piece, I'm Sitting in a Room, in which he records his voice and then play in a room, record it back multiple times until the resonances of the room, the resonances of his voice are amplified by the room. So I replicated the same process using simulation, using convolution. So we have the dry recording and the impulse response of the room, and using the output as an input multiple times until the resonances of the rooms represented in peaks of the frequency response. So first we'll listen to how that sounded, and then I'll show how this acts as a tool to amplify, such as like it acts as an amplifying glass showing the peaks that represents where the sound was amplified the most, depending on the acoustic characteristics of the room. This is the first convolution. The second. Third. And the fourth. By the fourth one, you start to realize that there are some frequencies that has been amplified more than others. So in order to evaluate and validate this method, first, I applied it to a room with a simple geometry in order to compare the result with the equation I shared previously. After that, when we consider the frequency response of the room in general through the convolution with a dry recording, we'll see that this is the frequency response of the room. And if we use a sound source similar to this one, which has more dB levels at low and mid frequencies than high frequencies, we can see that although these peaks were almost equal, with that convolution, we'll notice that some frequencies are going to have higher dB levels than others. If we take a more extreme example with this sound source that has a peak around mid-frequencies, then we'll see that the tool allow us to visualize the peaks even further. So you can see the same frequencies were amplified differently now. So now we considered different types of sound sources. Let's take a look at whether it takes into account the materials. So now if we have a sound source, and then we know how the room is amplifying certain frequencies, what if we wanted to treat the room surfaces in order to modify that amplification for certain frequency ranges? With the previous equation, we cannot consider the materials, but let's take a look at applying the methods here. So here are the two sound sources. We see different amplification depending on the dominant frequencies of the sound source, but also we see the impact of adding absorbers. So some of the peaks have been reduced now, depending on the frequency bands where the absorber is more effective. So this tool can help us to investigate how the absorber will impact the room modes once we place it in the room in order to modify the room design. I mentioned at the beginning that the motivation was to analyze room modes in spaces with complex geometries. So now applying the method in such a space and also considering placing the sound source at different locations, because that can allow us to understand where would be the best location for the sound source to achieve the amplification in a certain frequency band that we are targeting. And that's important because what I'm going to explain later, the link that I found between the amplification of certain frequency bands and the emotional impact. So let's take a look at this. At different locations, we see that the tool allows us to see the peaks at different locations. So for example, here at location S4, we notice this peak. This location is between the larger space and then the subspace. And therefore, it will inform us where would be the best place to locate the sound source. We notice this more extreme at high frequencies because with low frequencies, changing the location is not going to have the same impact. So I mentioned that the motivation was to create a connection or a link between the acoustic characteristics and the emotional indicators. If we go back to the same four case studies I used at the beginning to understand the emotional impact, we noticed that one of the buildings was associated with the highest rating for the emotional impact. And I talked about resonance. So I introduced resonance as a metric to be considered in analyzing the acoustics of a space because it was significant for that building, which was rated the highest for the emotional impact. So in that case, the two frequency ranges that were in which this building was different than others, mostly the low frequencies and high frequencies. So all the previous work was focused on the evaluation, but the goal was to inform the design of spaces that enhance positive experience, positive emotions, and well-being. The next step was to identify the psychoacoustic characteristics that can be used to design spaces that lead to restorative experience. What I did here was to use two existing databases. I'll present the indoor database results here. Using the metrics developed by the ISO standard for soundscape, including the psychoacoustic metrics, sharpness, fluctuation strength, and roughness, and the affective responses, including pleasant, eventful, annoying, and uneventful. So I wanted to see which psychoacoustic metrics are associated with the positive affective response. But the surprise was that I found that the correlation was higher between the negative affective response, as you can see here in this side, eventful and annoying, with the psychoacoustic metrics, sharpness, fluctuation strength, and even more significant with roughness. My assumption is that such psychoacoustic metrics, the goal was to minimize the impact of noise. But if we take an example of traffic noise with high roughness, decreasing the roughness will not make it more pleasant. So the next step was to identify then what are the acoustic metrics or psychoacoustic metrics, or how can we develop guidelines and metrics that allow us to design acoustic experiences that enhance positive emotions. So during the discussions with the research group who was working on this project, we were reflecting on some of the historic examples, such as ancient caves or even historic buildings. And we're thinking, what if there is something that has not been considered as much in the research of soundscapes and acoustics? More specifically, the majority of research done in acoustics and soundscape depends on passive listening to a pre-recorded sound, whether it was nature soundscape or even oralized sound. The participants will just passively listen to the sound and evaluate their affective response. But what if part of that restorative experience was related to the interaction between the participants or humans and the acoustic environment? If we take this example of the cave, maybe part of what made this experience significant is that because they were interacting with the acoustics of the cave itself. I had this as a personal experience walking into some of the historic buildings, hearing the echoes of the footsteps and so on was so impactful. So what if it was part of the experience? So we started thinking about exploring the role of real-time oralization through interacting with the acoustic environment itself. So this was a workshop I did at the MIT Museum, and I'm now presenting the Sound Escape project, in which the goal was to explore the restorative potential of acoustic environments by applying the attention restoration theory. So the attention restoration theory is based on the exposure of a positive stimulus that allow us to restore our attention. And the goal for this project was to provide a restorative environment for everyone, but maybe the long-term goal would be providing a coping mechanism as a tool for neurodivergent individuals, more specifically for individuals with ADHD, given that their challenge is related to attention. So this workshop was titled Meditation, Art, and Neuroscience in Conversation. And we had in the panelists, as panelists, we had a psychologist and a monk. And what I did was a little bit risky, but was an exciting exploration because I did it in real time. I asked the audience, one of them to volunteer to experiment with the real-time oralization. So one of the audience members joined, and I asked her to hum or vocalize spontaneously while projecting her voice oralized with the impulse response of Aya Sophia. The second time I played the oralization of her voice using the impulse of response of Aya Sophia, and I asked the audience members this time to all hum together with the oralized sound. And then after that, we asked them to reflect on their experiences. So there were multiple interesting reflections, but I'll share the ones that I think are the most significant, and I'll explain why I selected them. So one person mentioned that they felt as if they are in a different place, and I can explain this by listening to an acoustic environment of a different place that gave them the sense as if they are in a different place. Another one mentioned that they felt as if they lost sense of time. And then the monk mentioned that during meditation, when they repeat the mantra, one of their goals actually is to create that sense of losing sense of time by repeating the mantra multiple times. And my explanation that this could, maybe the reason why this happened with the oralization is that if we take a look at the dry recording here, and then the wet recording, it's exactly the same one, just oralized. We can see that the oralization with the reverberation, the long reverberation, extended the sound in time. So here it stopped almost after like 4.5 seconds, but here it extended until 7 seconds. So in that case, they are listening to the sound of now and a few seconds or a few milliseconds ago merged all together, and maybe that contributed to the feeling of losing sense of time. Although there was also another effect, which I explained in the multiple convolution method, which is that the acoustic environment will not only amplify certain frequency ranges, but will also dampen others. So it reshaped the sound itself. The third interesting response was related to one participant mentioned that she felt out of her head. So why I selected the 3 responses is because the psychologist mentioned that these are the 3 pillars of meditation: losing sense of self, losing sense of time, and losing sense of space. So I thought maybe there is good potential to take this research a step further and do it in a controlled environment. So this is a current project that we started, and we're collecting the data. Hopefully we'll present the results at the next ASA meeting in Hawaii. So the goal of this project is to understand the role of real-time oralization or interacting with an acoustic environment, representing the example I shared previously with the cave. So when I joined Virginia Tech, I was walking in the student center and I saw a sleeping pod similar to this one. And I immediately was thinking, what if we can create a place for recharging attention using the acoustic experience? So I was thinking, what if we can apply the real-time oralization here? The goal by adopting the attention restoration theory is to provide a stimulus that is engaging enough, but at the same time, it's not overstimulating. So based on the attention restoration theory, it's called soft fascination. And if we translate this to the affective response of based on acoustics, we envision that it's going to fall into this section of emotional arousal and valence. So it's positive in terms of valence. It's in terms of arousal, it's low to medium arousal. So that's what we are aiming for. And that's what we will test on the real-time oralization. Here's the experimental setup. So what we are using is a max patch that was developed by previous researchers that allow for real-time oralization. So this is just an example of how this works.
For the pilot study, the participant first entered the cabin.
Let me share how we can change the impulse response.
For the pilot study, the participant first entered the cabin. Followed by the glass room.
So this interface allows us to change the impulse response, but keep the real-time oralization. The experiment design. So we have, I should have mentioned here that we are using an EEG device to record or collect data related to brain activity. So we start by collecting the brain activity data through connecting the EEG, and then we measure the attention through using the digit span test, which I'll explain. And then after that, we expose the participants to a stressor. We ask them to interact with an acoustic environment. We test the attention again. So we have a baseline of the attention before the exposure and then after the exposure. Then after that, we ask them to self-report using the perceived restoration scale. We repeat this process using different impulse responses, and we wanted to explore whether different acoustic characteristics will also result in different restoration level. So here's the backward digit span test, which allow us to measure attention. The way it works is that we read certain numbers to the participants, and then we ask them to repeat them backwards. For example, we say 7296, and they're supposed to say 6927. And we have different levels of difficulty. So it starts with 2 numbers, and then the numbers increase. And then we stop at the point in which the participant cannot move forward. So once they are unable to recall the numbers, that's where we stop, and then we record the level that they were able to achieve. This is the cognitive stressor. So after we measure the baseline attention, we expose the participants to a cognitive stressor represented in the Stroop test. This is a very popular test. You might have seen it before. The participants are supposed to say the color based on the color they see, not the text. For example, here, green is written in red, so they're supposed to say red, not green. So it's very confusing, and that's why it's helpful to raise the stress level a little bit in order to investigate how the interaction with an acoustic environment will allow the participant to restore their attention, and then we measure it after that. So again, after the interaction with the acoustic environment, then we do the attention measure again using the backward digit span test, and then the self-report for the attention restoration. So given that there is a recommendation by the International Well Building Institute to include restorative spaces, the goal of this project is to provide a way or design guidelines to design that restorative space, focusing on sound as the stimulus for the restoration. So we see such phone pods in many office buildings. And what if we have resonant portals that allow us to restore our attention? So these pods is for creating a sound insulated space or quiet spaces, but this one is to create a restorative acoustic environment. This is just a conceptual design. We are working in this project and we'll develop the design further. This is just to create an imaginative design scenario for how we are anticipating to apply it. If we go back to the workshop that I shared previously, so one of the goals was to explore the role of the real-time oralization or interacting with an acoustic environment. But there is another factor to this experience, which is the social aspects. And here I move to the second project, Sonic Portal. In this project, which is the motivation or the inspiration for this project came because we were thinking about the 40 years anniversary of the Media Lab and thinking about the connection of different generations of this lab community. So we're thinking, what if we can create a tool to evoke memories using soundscape or the sonic experience, and therefore measure whether it's going to impact social connection or motivate people to take a social act. And I'll explain this further. So how do spatial sonic experiences influence memory evocation, place attachment, and social connection across different generations in the community? So while we're thinking about the experimental design of this project, we discussed a lot what kind of sounds should we include. During the discussions, one of the team members was having a conversation, just talking about the project with some of the staff members of the Media Lab. And she mentioned that although at the beginning they were talking about the Media Lab experience and then related topics before introducing the topic of sonic memories, and then they moved to the sonic memories, and suddenly people started sharing more about their daily interaction with the acoustic experience of the Media Lab. Once I enter the space, there's this significant sound of the elevator and then the door and so on, the echoey place of the atrium. So we thought that this should be part of the research design itself. So we had two phases. The first phase, we invited participants across different generations of the Media Lab community. The majority of them were alumni with some current members. And then we asked them to share with us some of the sonic memories, what sounds are most significant for their experience at the lab. I'll play some of the clips now, and then I'll share the next step.
Also, there's a few spots in this building that have really interesting kind of like, I don't know, acoustic properties that I really instantly kind of think about. Like, for example, there's a stairwell in E15, the really colorful one. That's super, super reverberant. Like if you go in there and like say something or like, I don't know, whack the wall, it'll like ring for 5 seconds. And when you ask the question, personally, I thought of memories where I would just like, this is kind of embarrassing, but sometimes I would like have lunch in there because I don't know, I liked how it sounded. So I think of things like that.
For me, the acoustics of the third floor is what comes to mind. It's just like this echoey sound of people walking and then me greeting them. And even though they're on the 5th floor, I can hear them very clearly because the whole space is very echoey. And yeah, just sounds of a bunch of people, for example, in
the staircase that you're in right now, like that kind of fact exit, that area, I love the sound of that, especially because those are like the stairs that I'll generally take to go down to work in the basement. And it's like just so echoey and like steps just get so loud. And then it's really awkward whenever you're having a conversation with somebody while you're trying to go down the stairs because it just like, it sounds so crazy in there.
What sonic memories do you have of the Media Lab? I don't know how much time everybody has spent in the stairwells in E15 singing or making music. But though we found, I'm seeing, yeah, so there's some, those are really great resonant spaces during my time at the lab.
Echoing footsteps and all the voices kind of like
multiple performance
cascading down from the different floors.
And then the last one.
Thinking of those resonant spaces, a calm and focus, a very, very much kind of state of flow emotions that you have to be very, very present, listening in very closely to everything that's going on, and the richness of the sound really.
So you may have noticed that there were some words repeated like echo, resonance. The staircase has been mentioned multiple times. The word resonance, the word even focus, calm. So what we did was that we collected the sounds, and I mean, we collected the narratives of explaining the sonic memories, but at the same time, we also collected sounds that represent what they were describing in their sonic memories.
So
And
there's a few spots in this
Amazing
building
right
that
now,
are
like
really
that's
interesting.
sorry about that. So we had a 3D scan of the Media Lab. So we have the visualization, and we placed the sounds that were mentioned in their location because we were interested in the spatial sound. So I'll play one of the examples, or actually I'll play two of them. I'll start with this one that represents the entrance to show how we used the sounds mentioned in addition to the narratives of the sonic memories.
You know, walking into the lobby especially and kind of feeling the echo of your own steps is like a really like distinct feeling of arrival. You know, walking.
Here it is.
And a similar thing with the elevators thing on in 14. But
I'm Joe Paradiso from the MIT Media Lab, and this is my synthesizer.
But in the lobby, like the sounds, there's like currently like background music that plays on one of the clips, and there's for some reason this one like audio clip of someone saying like a platform of like 3 billion users, something like.
Let's go now to the other floor. I'll take you now to the staircase that was mentioned multiple times.
About 9 minutes after we spent playing this, so I tell you, I continue to watch this problem challenge.
oh. Oh.
Each one little song or something or so.
This is the staircase that was mentioned. Okay, I'm gonna stop now. So we had two conditions. One of them was the visuals only without any sounds. And then the second one was the visuals with the sounds, which is the one I just shared with you. And once the participants experience this, we ask them multiple questions in order to understand whether this impacted their memory evocation, place attachment, and social connection. So
Wait, funny story, I think.
for the memory evocation, we have first a question that is asking them to recall or to describe a memory that they recalled after interacting with the sonic experiences of the Media Lab. And then we ask them multiple questions that are related to the memory evocation scale. There is also the place attachment scale. And then for the social connection, which is the most interesting part for me, we ask them at the very beginning, before the exposure, we ask them how often, especially like the alumni, we ask them how often they interact currently with the Media Lab. That's like before, and then they interact with the sonic experiences. And then after that, we ask them whether they considered reaching out to a member of the Media Lab community, and then we ask them how many times are they interested in participating in future events, which is low commitment, but then another level of commitment if they are interested in future mentorship of current Media Lab members. So we are hoping to see whether there is an influence of the sonic experiences and the sonic memories in motivating them to create further social connection. So I'm going to play this last clip from the phase 1 workshop, in which one of the participants actually said something that was very significant that already contributes to the question of exploring whether sharing the sonic memories will create that sense of connection across multiple generations.
With Ellie's story, I think about being connected to the Media Lab community across generations, like knowing that the same sensory experiences were available to people who long preceded us, getting to explore the building and its culture and its wonderful people.
And the interesting thing is that they did not know the research questions. So they did not know that we wanted to explore these aspects of connection across generation. So I'll end up by asking you, what was your transformative sonic experiences? And I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Alaa, for this great presentation. Thank you so much. Very, very interesting, really, what you've been doing. Yes, as I put in the chat, you can send your questions in the Q&A. Let's see if there is anyone. We'll leave people some time to type down their questions. Don't be shy. Well, people type the questions. I have one for you, Alaa. I've been told when I was studying that sometimes these reverberant spaces, for example, when you enter a big church or the parliament, make you feel that there is like a higher authority that's taking on is in that space. And when you're home in like a cozy environment with a pretty dry acoustics, you feel a little bit safer, and that helps in your well-being in the sense that you feel that you're at home. Do you subscribe to that? Do you think that's correct?
Yeah, I'm not sure if your question is whether the reverberant place could contribute to enhancing well-being. And I think this is a very interesting question, because if I go back to the previous, the first example I shared with the impact of acoustics on emotions in worship spaces, a question that I kept asking, actually in the paper, if you're interested, you can read the full paper. We asked them about 2 emotions, calm and spiritual. And many people ask me, why are you asking about calm and spiritual? Aren't they the same? And I didn't think that they are the same. And the reason for that, if I go back to the emotions circle, let's go back. So in the emotion circle, my assumption was that the calm is low in arousal, but also positive in valence, and spiritual is positive in valence, but a little bit high in arousal. And the physiological measurements showed that it raises the heart rate, which means that it increases the arousal. If I connected this back to the attention restoration theory, with the attention restoration theory, the assumption is that the exposure to a stimulus that is engaging enough, but not overstimulating, such as exposure to nature, will help you to restore your attention and enhance your well-being. And I think that's the area I'm targeting now. So in order to achieve the feeling of calm, maybe a quiet place will allow you to achieve that. So depending on your emotional level, you might want to choose a calm space, or if you feel fatigued and you want to restore your attention, what I'm aiming for is the awe-inspiring experience. That is, the reverberant acoustics can hopefully, I mean, that's what I'm testing with the current project, is whether this awe-inspiring experience will create a restorative environment for enhancing attention.
Thank you. Well, Gisela says, thank you for your presentation, very interesting. Any questions? Any topics that you might be interested in Alaa providing more information?
You can also share an acoustic experience that was significant. I mean, anyone, if you have some.
Yeah, also, yes. You can share something that inspired you, some sounds or acoustics experience that were important in your life. Here we have some. So Gisela says, I would like to test something similar under the sea, because she deals with ocean acoustics and marine mammals and this kind of sounds of communication of whales and dolphins. So could be interesting to analyze that as well, no?
For humans, like the sound.
I guess we cannot hear very well under the water, I think, but for animals, perhaps, I don't know. Dolphins are pretty intelligent, so perhaps we could analyze that. So we have a question from Mario. He says, hi, Fernando, Alaa. Thank you for so precious info about the experience. I don't know if it's related, but sometimes when I feel so anxious, I tune up a radio station at low level just to fill the room, and that brings peace.
Yeah, that's my assumption, is like maybe for you, the music sound and turning it down, making sure that it's not overstimulating, provides that kind of low level stimulation that keeps you going. So maybe.
Yes, Gisela mentions for dolphins. Yes, exactly, for dolphins. Could find out ways in which they can be relaxed or more stressed with different sounds, perhaps. Well, any other comments, questions, experiences with acoustics that have been impactful in your life? Don't be shy. Okay, Gisela says, when my daughter was little, she was calmed by the sound of the hair dryer.
Probably white noise.
So what are your thoughts about masking noise in offices?
Yeah, that's a topic that I have been thinking about multiple times. So yeah, I'm not sure I'm very supportive. I don't have enough evidence. Maybe I need to look into that, but my assumption is that it is going to consume part of your attention as well. So you might, I mean, we noticed that the AC was generating noise once it stops, and then we feel, oh, finally, it's quiet now. So I'm not sure. Maybe it's related to the characteristics of the sound itself. Maybe if it's a nature sound, it will have a different effect. Maybe it's going to be more towards a restorative sound rather than just white noise or pink noise. But I don't have enough evidence to support my thought.
Do you think that we can do better than pink noise, or we can have a stimuli that is even more restorative of concentration and privacy than pink or white noise? Do you think we can do better?
I think that white and pink noise might help with the privacy issue. What I'm not sure about is whether it's enhancing attention or consuming attention. Because
understand.
I mentioned that the stimulus has to be engaging or inspiring. I'm not sure if white noise or pink noise is providing that. Otherwise, it's going to be consuming attention, not restoring attention. But what if we can provide some sounds that achieve both, like
Okay.
sound privacy and restore attention?
Any other questions for Alaa? I think also people could, are you willing to share your email in case there are other questions, or
Sure.
people?
Yeah, it's my last name @vt.edu.
Okay.
I can post it on the chat.
Well, let me see if there are something I missed. Okay, since we do not have any more questions, so I would really like to thank you, Alaa, for sharing all this information with us. It's really interesting and thought-provoking. It kind of makes you think about things in another perspective. Sometimes, as more of a practitioner in noise control and concert hall acoustics, we do not take all the things into account that are subtle, but they're also very, very, very interesting and very useful. I think in the future, I'm sure we'll be seeing more of this implemented in everyday life. So, well, so thank you very much, Alaa, and we'll have this. Yeah, and this presentation is being recorded, and you will be able to see it in our YouTube channel. And well, thank you very much, everyone, and thank you, Alaa.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a nice evening. Goodbye.